This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
Welcome to Black and Privileged in America podcast, power, love, and money conversations relevant to Black thriving. I'm your host, Abena Sankofa. Today, we have a very important topic that we're going to be discussing because we're living in an age where Black people need to be safe, and we can't take our safety for granted. Not in churches, not in the grocery store, not at a traffic stop, or even in our homes. The threat of domestic terrorism, particularly white supremacist violence, has grown louder, more organized, and more shameless. And while the news cycles move on quickly, we don't forget Buffalo. We don't forget Charleston. We don't forget what it means to be both visible and vulnerable in the United States of America. The question isn't just what do we do if it happens again? The question is, how do we stay ready right now without living in fear? So joining me today is Diogenes Ayala, former Director of Emergency Management and Homeland Security for Madison County, Iowa. From 2021 to late 2024, he led planning and response to major emergencies, including the devastating EF4 tornado in Winterset, Iowa, where he coordinated recovery efforts with more than 1,000 volunteers over the course of 30 days. Diogenes Ayala was named Emergency Manager of the Year in 2023, Hero of the Heartland from the American Red Cross in 2023, and he is also certified in counterterrorism training, such as DHS's bomb making materials awareness program. His skills in identifying threat patterns, building community resilience, and combating misinformation are vital as we confront rising white supremacist violence and domestic terror. We're honored to have him share his insights on how Black communities can strengthen safety and preparedness in these fraught times. Diogenes, welcome to Black and Privileged in America.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you.
I have to, of course, represent my fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. Go Mob. Got to start with that first.
What are your colors? Hold on. What are the game colors?
I got my
sorry.
We're blue and white. I got my bracelet right here. So,
oh, it's beautiful. I love the bracelet.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'm sure that your frat appreciates the shout out.
Yes.
I am married to a frat person, an Omega.
It's all right.
He's going to be watching. He's going to be listening.
That's all right.
But I've grown to appreciate what that means, what it means. I'm not in a sorority or anything. Yeah. I'm not in the Divine Nine, so I didn't really understand. But watching him and his brothers interact in the ways that they impact the community, I have an appreciation for that. So thank you.
Yes, the community is strong. So I'm glad to be a part of it. And even though your husband's not a Sigma per se, still part of the family, still Greek, so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for your forgiveness.
Yes, it's all right. It's all right.
And so Black institutions are incredibly important in our community. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how your brotherhood has kind of lived that out and impacted your communities?
Yeah, so it's important. I mean, brotherhood's really important for as a person of color, right? As a Sigma, culture for service, really looking out for people, understanding what the needs are out there, and then try to provide those needs. I think where we're at right now in society, in our country, is that we're seeing a lot of programs that are being cut and sliced. So we have to, as a community, do more to help those who are in need, right? So think about not just economy or budgets, just think about like disaster. Like disaster really is, the funding really is getting less and less. And regardless of your political ideology, FEMA is not the FEMA that it was 2 years ago.
Right. So I read, I might have this a little twisted up, so correct me if I'm wrong or in error, but FEMA isn't what it was. So there were recent floods in Texas. And of course, we're in tornado season in Iowa. Anything could happen. Is it the case that the federal government will no longer support the emergency response?
Not the case that they're not going to necessarily support emergency response, but the funding is not where it used to be. So, for example, Arkansas put out a disaster declaration, and the federal government did not give money, right? So it's right now it kind of feels like a picking and choosing, which is obviously not good for anybody. But primarily, people of color suffer the worst when it comes to disasters, just because Think about environmental justice, right? Houses are not in great places. They're put in floodplains. Think about what happened in Texas, right? Mm-hmm. That was a 1,000-year floodplain, I want to say, and obviously it flooded, right? People were lost. So a lot of this stuff has to do with mitigation and understanding like what's out there, not responding. We do a really bad job of being reactive and not proactive, and we see a lot of examples every day when that happens. And unfortunately, until we change our mindset, we're going to continue to see disaster the way we're seeing them today.
That's so sad. And I think about like Texas and Arkansas, states that politically are red, not getting the response that they typically would have in the past. I wonder if they're salty about that, but that's another question for another day. But I just want to throw that shade out there.
Yeah.
But still, my heart goes out to those families and communities that are impacted. So domestic terrorism, I think we know what it is, but do we really? So can you define domestic terrorism? What is your definition, and what should we know about mainstream definitions that might leave out some important information for us?
So domestic terrorism, if you think about it, we can go back in history. Think about Reconstruction, right? So after slavery, Reconstruction happened, try to reconcile some of the things that happened during slavery, and then the KKK reformed and started terrorizing African Americans. 1,000 people were killed, right? Women, children, because they were not happy with the way the government was going, and it kind of forced the government to make some changes. That's an example of domestic terrorism, right? So I'm forcing my ideologies upon you. If I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to cause violence in order for you to just either get scared or give up to help me get to my goal, right? So that's the problem with domestic terrorism. So if you think about slavery, if you think about the incident in Oklahoma City, Timothy McVeigh, right? He was mad
at the bombing at the federal building,
at the Edward Murrow Federal Building, because he was upset about the government's response to Waco, right, and Ruby Ridge. So he decided that he had attacked a building. What people don't realize about that part of domestic terrorism is he picked that building in particular, even though it had a daycare center in there.
Yeah, I saw a documentary on that recently, and when that happened, I was young and on the periphery of understanding what was happening. But as an adult watching that and seeing those parents seeking to find their children who were in the daycare, and a woman sitting at her desk and she's strapped to her chair but beneath rubble. Yeah. It was horrific.
The really interesting part about that was he picked a place in Arkansas, a building, but they had a flower shop. And he felt that that flower shop would kill innocent people. He didn't believe that the kids of federal employees were innocent people.
Wow.
That's a big part of the problem with domestic terrorists, right? Because they have a very one-track mind. They want to cause violence. They want it to get their ideology out there. It doesn't matter who is hurt in the process. And you can kind of look at different things. I mean, people really debate about January 6th. Either it was a tour of the White House or it was the Capitol, or it was actually an attack. But that would be an example of domestic terrorism, right?
I was going to say, like, who can argue that Jan 6 was not domestic terrorism?
People out there have different opinions, right?
By your definition, it is clear that it is. It was.
And there's a lot of examples throughout history. So to me, it's when someone wants to influence something, they'll use violence in order to get that done. And we've seen that. I mean, this is not new in America. We've seen a lot of domestic terror attacks, again, back to slavery. The Capitol being attacked wasn't the first time. January 6th, they actually was attacked by a Puerto Rican nationalist group, back in the 60s or 50s. So that's domestic terrorism. And what the problem is for us is that we don't prepare for this kind of, we don't really prepare in general for this kind of attacks and or mitigate these threats prior to. And that's kind of why we're talking about this today. So
in terms of preparedness, like, what are the warning signs? I mean, as a Black woman living in America, I know full well what to look for, I think, but to articulate it to the public, like, what should we be looking out for, the red flags?
Well, I think first and foremost is there's different cycles to it, but think about surveillance. Like you mentioned Buffalo, right? So people don't realize, and I've done a lot of research on this because it's one of my things is I was at Naval Postgraduate School. I just graduated last year. My master's in Homeland Security and Defense.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're qualified. You know what you're talking about.
Yes, I had a lot of research on,
and
I wrote a thesis on domestic terrorism and some other things as well. But what happened with that particular case is that he did surveillance for a very long time. He just didn't decide to walk in there and start shooting. What he did was he sat outside for a number of days, wrote down times that were busy. And also Google will tell you when something's busy, right? So if you go into like an appointment, it'll say like, oh, this is the busiest time for the day of this appointment, right? Or this is the time the store is not as busy. He used that to his advantage.
That's that geographic mapping thing.
Yep. And there's also a bar. It'll have like little bars like, oh, this is the time you should go to grab your groceries. Mm-hmm. But what he also did the day before the shooting, he dressed up like he was homeless and he walked into the store to do surveillance one more time, to see if anyone would notice him acting in this certain way. And a security officer who wound up dying the next day saw him and said, hey, you can't be here. You have to get out. Like you can't panhandle here. And when he went back home, he wrote in his manifesto that he had to kill that man.
Oh,
and then
my
next
God.
day he did. So what it comes down to is being aware of your surroundings. We tend to put our phone to our faces. We tend to not pay attention, right? And those are the things that bad guys want to see, because if you are not paying attention to your surroundings and they are doing things that are trying to test your security posture, it could be a really big deal.
I mean, could the bad guys also be playing on Black folks' propensity toward generosity? I mean, a homeless person, that's a person in need. I can't think of, well, I could probably think of one or two people that wouldn't help him, but for the most part, we want to know, are you okay? Do you have somewhere to go? You need $1, here's $1. And even in Charleston, Dylan Roof went into the church. He was welcomed into the church. So, I mean, this is, I feel like it's going to impact the propensity of us to be generous. What are your thoughts on that, as opposed to, being aware of our surroundings and being generous?
I think, there are people that are generous, right?
Yeah. I'm not one.
Yeah.
Not that way. I'm watching.
Yeah.
But
I believe that, again, people that are going to do this kind of work, the bad work, are looking for any in to get in. So Dylan Roof obviously used Bible study to get into there and obviously cause a horrific violence. But even if you just look at just generalization of going to church, right? So church is really important in every community, but understanding how to secure a church, right? People don't understand that, right? Sometimes people think that a good guy with a gun will save the day. Yes, but also if you're in the military, you're a law enforcement officer, you know how to take care of, if you have to use a weapon, you've been trained in that. And a regular person that hasn't had their adrenaline pumping is not going to have a great shot. You hear the success stories, but you don't really hear about the stories that are not successful. So it's important to really understand a security plan, right? Understand we have so many doors here, people are going to go there. If this happens here, it's better to prepare now than try to do it later, because what tends to happen is after the fact, you're on the news, you're trying to explain we had this, we knew this was going to happen, but we didn't really prepare. We don't want to have that, right? I always think about 9/11. There was a security director that right before, a couple of years beforehand, he would make people go from one floor to another constantly, and they hated it. Well, why are we doing this drill? This is so stupid. This will never happen. His name was Richard Riscola. And when 9/11 happened, they knew exactly where to go.
It was muscle memory at that point.
They survived because he told them, go down the stairs. And they all went. He went back upstairs, and he was never seen again.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But the point is, preparing is a good thing. Exercising that preparation is really, really key, because if you don't do it now, you're going to have a lot of problems later.
So hardening our infrastructure.
Exactly.
Okay.
One of the things I also suggest, and I've done this at churches, actually a church here in Des Moines, I won't mention the name. A lot of times we want to tell everybody what we're doing. That's our problem, right? So social media, right?
Move in silence.
Yes. So social media. Hey, I guess I'm going to Bermuda for 2 weeks. Hey, look at me. I'm in Mexico and I'm having a drink. Stop doing that, because those things help people that are not in your best interest know what you're up to. You don't always have to tell everybody what you're doing. Same thing goes with churches and schools, right? You'd be surprised if you go online to you pick a church, you can find pictures of that church without actually having to step into that church, right? I've done that, right? I've looked at different threat patterns and say, I'm going to look at a particular school, and I'm going to get all the information I can just off the internet, right? And then I can make that threat pattern from there. So people can do that. And that's what the kid did in Buffalo, right? The shooter, he went online and found the place in New York that had the most amount of people of color, and that's where he struck because he found it on the internet, right? So think about schools, and schools say, hey, at 7 o'clock we have, you come in, at 10:30 we have break.
Yeah, the whole schedule is out for the public.
There. So again, if I'm going to create terror, I know what to do prior to even going out there, right? I don't have to physically stand there. I know from just looking online.
So harden our infrastructure, move in silence.
Yes.
Don't post everything online.
Not everyone needs to know everything.
And then you mentioned being able to self-defend. Are you suggesting that those who can bear arms?
I mean, it's a right?
It is. It's the Second Amendment. I think I have my Constitution right here.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. See, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
I think anything you can do to defend yourself legally, you should, right? I say that if you feel like you are in danger and or should be prepared for danger, then you should probably figure out different ways of self-defense. But it's not always guns, right?
Right.
And I'll explain this. I always tell people this with mace. People carry mace in their keychain, and they feel secure about that. But have you actually ever maced yourself? Now it seems silly to say, like, why would you mace yourself?
Oh, right? My goodness, macing yourself.
And I'm not saying go home and mace yourself, but I'm just making an example.
Okay.
Right? If you and I are in an alleyway, I'm a bad person, right? And I decide I'm going to attack you. You pull out your mace. It's a windy day like it is today. You spray the mace. You hit me in the eye, but that mace comes back, hits you in the eye. You don't know what that feels like, and you're in some trouble.
Yeah.
Because I'm irritated because you sprayed me in the face. You're scared because now you can't see, and one of us is going to win this fight, right? That's why the military, like I was in the Navy, right? You get gassed, so you're used to that gas. So if you are in a situation where you're in the middle of a conflict, you get gassed, then you understand, like, hey, this is what's going to happen to me, so then I can continue moving forward.
I know that there are some public safety officials and security officers who carry tasers, and then as a part of their training, they have to be tased.
Yes.
Same thing.
But the other side of it, too, is people get really confident when they have that kind of weaponry on them, right? So if I am carrying a gun, a taser, right? Say I'm in law enforcement, say I'm just regular Joe, right? Regular guy. I'm bringing stuff to the party, right? So if I don't have good weapon retention, and you are a better fighter than I am, then I'm just giving you all my tools to hurt me with. Yeah.
Right?
So because sometimes people feel confident, I have a gun. That's great, but do you have good weapon retention? I've seen people in stores around here, and their gun is all flippy floppy in their back in the back of their belt. Like, there's no good weapon retention, right? So all because you have the weapons doesn't necessarily make you a dangerous person, right? So think about that too.
What other practical steps do we need to know about that we can take in order to be safe and be prepared?
Well, I think, again, security posture is huge. We talked about that. I think understanding your environment and understanding what you see around you. Again, we have feelings, we're all human beings with instincts to say, hey, this seems weird, right? This doesn't feel right. Butterflies in your stomach. When you have that feeling like this doesn't seem right, take that advice and go forward. Sometimes
that intuition does mean something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a club or I'm in a restaurant and someone's starting to act up, right, and I look, like, that might not be a good interaction for me. I need to step out of that. Like, understanding a way to get out. Everywhere I go, I always look for exits, right? So I came in this building, I know the exit out, right?
Because we don't sit with our back to the door either.
Yeah, we don't, right? But in the times that I do have to sit my back to the door because whatever the situation might be, right? I still try to find an angle that I could see what's going on. And people find, depending who you're with, it can be rude, but I'm constantly scanning, right? Because when we get too relaxed and content, there's a behavior happening on this side or this side, and it's starting to escalate, but I'm so busy on my phone, or I'm so busy staring at the TV that I don't see this danger coming towards me. And again, this is what people are using to cause harm because we're not paying attention.
How do we do all of this and not have anxiety? Like, how do we stay sane while staying safe?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this for a number of years. So people ask me all the time, like, you're no fun. Like,
I mean, you seem to have this calm, peaceful vibe. I would not want to make you mad. Dio, I wouldn't want to make you mad.
Well, here's what I would say to that. I think if you are ready for something, then you are calm. when you're not ready for something, you're anxious.
Okay.
Right. So if you are prepared to be like, hey, these things can happen. When it happens, you could disconnect. Right. So if you go back to the tornado, for example.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Tornado
Talk about that.
So tornado happens. It looked like a Hollywood movie scene. It was like an explosion. Right.
This is the one in Winterset.
This is the one outside of Winterset, Madison County, but they call it the Winterset tornado. Everything's broken up. Cars flipped over, debris everywhere. I get there, and it felt like 29 minutes. I was probably there for 30 seconds.
Wow.
I got out, and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening, right? But after I had that initial, I can't believe this is happening, I had to disconnect to go to work, right? That's how I look at things. Sometimes you got to disconnect from a situation because
so emotionally detach and
detach,
just focus on the job.
Because when you focus on everything else, then sometimes you get lost in that. Now, not saying that I didn't have to like reconcile that later, right? Because you see things and you just like, I got to keep pushing forward, but they never really go away. That's why mental health counseling is important, right? But I think it's also important to disconnect, because when you disconnect and everyone else is panicking, you could say, okay, here's exactly what's happening, right? This is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be, taken care of. So I always look at it as it's okay to disconnect, but you got to reconnect, right? You can't disconnect and be a robot all the times, but you have to be prepared.
You have to reconnect. So I'm interested in how you reconnect, what you do to kind of bring yourself back to center. I mean, the few times that I've interacted with you, I wouldn't be able to say that this guy has seen some things. You just seem like the assumption. I don't want to draw assumptions, but I know that seeing the aftermath of a tornado had to have an impact on you. You probably saw things that the average person will never see. So what do you do personally to bring yourself back to center and reconnect?
It's funny. So I really want to see the Batman story. So the Batman movie came out the Friday, and the tornado came on Saturday. They had like a sneak preview like on a Wednesday. The entire time, like, I want to see the Batman. Like, it became like a running joke. Like, I want to see the Batman, but I was so busy. And someone pulled me aside and said, look, you need to get out of here, right? Like, you need to take an afternoon off because you've done what you could. We can handle this for a day. Go take a day off. And I learned something really quickly about that is it's okay, even if you were in the middle of it, to then, as you just said, connect, go back into the world, right? Because I wasn't doing that. I was just constantly like, sleep a little bit, go work on something, help someone, find out what's going on. So for me, it's just going back to like watch a movie, get a laugh, right? Be around people that you care about or they care about you. Right?
Yeah.
Those are the things that matter, because if you don't do that, then you can get lost in anxiety. And we are an anxious society, right? There's a book about the anxious generation and things like that.
I think I have that somewhere. Yep.
There you go, yeah. Because social media, right? So I am off social media. I don't like social media.
You're not on it at all.
I got off it, except for LinkedIn.
You're my hero. You and Ta-Nehisi, y'all made the commitment to not be a part of the online world in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation. But what I kind of felt with the kind of work that I do when it looks at terrorism, things like that. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and you start kind of falling down the rabbit hole with that misinformation, because that's what it tends to do, is to make you feel like, hey, this is hopeless, right? So I just kind of disconnected from it because it was just too much of that negative behavior, right? And I also feel like, if you have 400 friends on Facebook, do you really have 400 friends? Probably not. Right?
You're lucky if you have 3.
Yeah, really, really good friends. So for me, it was just trying to get away from that chatter and then refocusing myself to know what's actually important out there, right? So I do delve in certain places, social media to pull information from, but I don't participate in it, right? I'm just kind of just pulling a little bit that I need. So if I'm like, hey, I'm looking at, for example, we had the Patriot Front come in here in Des Moines.
Yeah. Right? I mean, they weren't here too long ago.
They weren't here. They were here in February.
Yeah.
Because of my research, I knew that it was Patriot Front right off the bat. I was like, that's Patriot Front, right?
They were the guys that were in the U-Haul.
Yes.
And got dropped off downtown.
Yes. They come in a U-Haul.
And they were marching.
They usually marching. But the thing about the Patriot Front, which is dangerous, is that they march with their signs. Those signs can be weapons. They also carry flagpoles. Look very patriotic, but also can be used as a pole, right? As a weapon. So like things like that, it's like, oh, I know this, right? This is very important to look at. but also educate people. That's why I'm here today, right? Is to educate, because that's what I'm trying to do now. Is I have all this information, but I haven't really done a good job distributing it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, because I know I have some listeners and some viewers that are curious about this stuff. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so this is immensely helpful. You mentioned a moment ago misinformation. Can you talk a little bit about how misinformation gets weaponized and what we can do to recognize it and to come against it, to combat it?
So a great example of that is before our current presidential administration, there was a talk about Texas. If you remember, President Biden's administration didn't want the barbed wire fencing.
Yeah.
And Governor Abbott said, we're going to keep the barbed wire fencing. And it was a big to-do, right?
And you're talking about the southern border of the United States.
Of the southern border.
Texas.
Russia, China, some other countries took that story and turned it into that Texas and America were starting a civil war, okay?
Oh, snap. I didn't know that.
So Texas and the rest of America were going to war because of the border, because of the barbed wire. What tends to happen is this information starts to filter out through, different places, countries, and so on and so forth. Then it kind of catapults back toward us, right? So that misinformation is very important. There's also something called the Great Replacement Theory, which I don't know if your viewers understand the Great Replacement Theory.
Can you explain it?
Sure. The theory is basically that it was actually from France. It was a book that was created. It wasn't called the Great Replacement Theory, but it was a book. And it was about Africans going into France, and that eventually these Africans take over the country and basically wipe out the population. Okay?
By reproduction.
Reproduction, by taking over the government, like a complete and utter takeover. So the Great Replacement Theory has become a really big talking point, and it Tucker Carlson, there's a lot of
right-wing conservatives are really pushing that out there.
What they usually say is like, whatever happened to whatever happened to America, the America I remember, right? That's the kind of talking points, or what's happening with certain actions, right? Because again, this is fear. Because there was a statistic a long time ago that said that Hispanics were going to outnumber everybody else by a certain time.
Like 2050 or something, yeah. 2020, 30, yeah.
That's a good Great Replacement Theory talking point. Like, look, they're trying to replace us.
But is that not true to a degree, that this country will be majority people of color in a couple of years or so?
I mean, I think so. I mean, generations, right? I mean, that is a possibility. But who knows what's going on currently?
White folks ain't going away, is the point.
Well, I mean, I look at it as like people, love people, there's a lot of people that are, biracial, like it's just not the same as it used to be. But that's what the threat is to some people, some extremists. Like, it's not the way it's supposed to be or used to be. And we got to take it back to where it was. And that's when you see like legislation changing and other things that are happening where it's like, why are we going backwards in time? It's because a lot of it has the elements of the Great Replacement Theory.
Right. So what is it that we can do to build smarter, I don't even know if that's the right word, but to build better networks of communication and ways to respond to the information that we consume?
I think honestly is being objective to it, right? So for example, if I'm if I consider myself a liberal, right, I'm going to go to CNN. If I'm conservative, I go to Fox. They're telling me what I want to hear.
Right.
That's the problem. Because
listen to other opinions.
Yes. So when I was writing my thesis, I had to look at different news sources. I had to look at Fox. I had to look at News Nation. I had to look at CNN, right? The British Broadcasting Corporation. All these different news outlets to kind of get what I thought was the most accurate information to put into a thesis.
Right.
I consume the news the same way, right? I'll go look at like a MSNBC and a Fox, right? Because somewhere in the middle there's some truth. But also we tend to get news and then run out and tell everybody, like, I saw this on the news last night. Or let me go back to the Civil War in Texas, right? Somebody's uncle at Thanksgiving thought we were going to go to war, right? Because they're getting their news sources from different places. One of the other things that we are seeing is like TikTok is a huge news source for people, especially young people. Facebook, older people will tend to go on Facebook to get their news or go to YouTube to get their news. So we're really going to unreliable sources, right? Because I can tell you that, hey, in Des Moines, it's sunny outside.
Right.
And we have some clouds, but then also say But if you look at the cloud, to the east of us, that's not really a cloud. That's actually a storm cloud, and that storm cloud has arsenic or some ridiculous thing. And someone will turn around and be like, "Hey, I heard."
When the answer is really go outside.
Go outside and find out yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And get
Wow.
that information. So.
Incredibly helpful. Gosh, our time is winding up really fast, and we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
I think there's going to have to be a part 2.
Sure.
But I think you've led through trauma and through all kinds of disasters, a real life hometown hero, truly. Resilience. What does it look like? What does recovery look like? And how do we think about that in the face of hate-driven violence?
Sure. So I think resilience is just basically being prepared, right? Like, I think as, Black people, right, we've been through a lot. People have been through a lot and been able to bounce back and continue to move forward. I think in general, as a people, is just being prepared and understanding, like, some things aren't going to go our way, but we have to get up and keep pushing forward. It's easy to give up, right? I think in society today, we're having this, like, give up mentality.
Yeah, it's so sad. We can never give up.
Yeah, we can never give up. We got to keep pushing forward.
I keep thinking about the arc of time and how it's taken generations to get this far.
Yeah.
We have to have that not give up spirit and then pass that on to our children and their children. Yeah. That's how we sustain.
Yeah. And really, if you look at history, right? So despite the fact that we're seeing a lot of things change, we're somewhat better off than we were back in 1960, right? Or 1940 or 1930. However, we still got to stay the course and keep that going. You said something about hateful violence. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just making sure that what that resilience actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, so I think
because it's a buzzword now. What does it look like in practice?
In practice is like, if you go to church, if you're any sort of event, like doing the planning, understanding where their threats might be, right? So threats are coming from everywhere. It's not just weather, it's man-made threats, right? If you are, depending on your religion, someone might not like you for that. Depending on your orientation, someone may not like you for that. Like, understanding the threat environment is really, really huge. We had the Patriot Front here in Iowa ready, right? We had a couple of years ago, we had Aryan Nation come here and protest, right? So there are elements. In fact, in Iowa, I want to say there's like 7 to 8 hate groups currently, right? That's active in Iowa. You want to go find out more about that, go to SPLC Hate Map. They have the whole country covered, right? So we have hate groups in Iowa. We have hate groups all over the place. And a lot of these hate groups don't run around and say, I'm in a hate group, right? So again, it goes back to understanding people, right? Looking at people's intentions, even tattoos, right? I have tattoos, but some of these guys have tattoos that are pretty blatantly racist and or saying things that you should be like, that seems pretty interesting to me, right? Like, understanding, like, not say profiling per se, but looking at someone and making a quick assessment, right? I always tell kids this quickly. If I'm at the mall, Jordan Creek Mall, and I go to Century 21, and then I go to the Gap, and I go to Apple, and the same person's with me the whole time, then that's a problem, right? So understanding your environment is really important.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Gosh. How do we segue to books? Oh, my goodness. But I'm going to do it. It's going to be a hard turn.
Yeah, sure.
But I would love to hear your book recommendation for our audience.
Yeah, so there's a book. It's called God, Guns, and Sedition.
Ooh,
right?
Whoa.
It's by Jacob Ware. It's a really good book. It kind of talks about, we kind of talked about a little bit today, right? Domestic terrorism, some of these groups that are coming in. There's another book called Birchers, kind of about the John Birch Society, which is we can do a whole podcast on the John Birch Society alone. But it just talks about, again, some of these groups, how they started and where they're at today. Because if you can understand the history of why they're doing what they're doing, you can kind of solve how we can stop them. So those are the
wonderful.
Books
Thank you. We'll add those to the show notes. I have a couple of book recommendations myself. One that I didn't bring with me, but it came to mind as you gave yours. The first one is Negroes and the Gun, The Black Tradition of Arms by Nicholas Johnson. Okay. He's an attorney who teaches at some really cool school somewhere in the United States. And then there is White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Mind by Roland Martin. Excellent read. I highly recommend that. And then again, you can't go wrong with the trusty, testy Constitution. We've got to know what this says. We've got to know that. But Diogenes Ayala, thank you so much for being here on Black and Privileged.
I look forward to coming back.
Thank you.
More. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Stay engaged. Stay curious. Keep striving. Thanks for listening. Until next time.